Hello and welcome to another episode of the Women Series program where we capture developments and stories that impact women. We're live at the launch of the second edition of the Tier 1 Bank Report by ProShare, and I'm speaking with Mrs. Ibukun Oyedeji, the CFO of EcoBank and also the President of Chartered Financial Analysts. Hello, Ma. How are you doing? It's good to have you here after a very long time. So we've had such an interesting conversation today, which of course speaks to the launch of the ProShares Tier 1 Banking Report, which that's the second edition, and coming in timely. People have had different remarks about it, but let me quickly hear from you. What's your impression about this report, and how timely would you even refer to this report, considering the economic standpoint at which we are relating to the banking system?
As a nation, we're going through reforms, and whether reforms in terms of the fuel subsidy, which has an inflationary impact on us, but probably the right trend for us as a nation, for us to for the growth and development we want to see, and rather than having handouts as to drive productivity, I believe that would see an improvement in our productivity. But also the FX reform, which is a big topic that also has inflationary impact, but also on the books of the banks and the size of the banks, because depending on what percentage of the balance sheet is FCY, it begins to tell you the size in which your bank would have grown. I think in terms of the report, the stress on efficiency, not just the size of your balance sheet, is an important conversation we need to have. Size doesn't mean efficiency. Size doesn't mean profitability. And those parameters are key things, are fundamental to see the growth and the sustainability of any organization, of any bank right now in the system. And so when you think about the concept or the model or the coefficients that are being used in the parameters that ProShare has defined as, they're really exciting and really what me as a CFO I pay attention to. So it's a report that flows more in line with what we look at, and more importantly, what investors are looking for in order to decide whether or not it's an investment they want to do or not.
So one of the outlook, or one of the things that were to be considered in the report is, of course, speaks to gender balance, and by gender balance, I mean having women on the board of organizations. I mean, what would you make of this?
I think very key in terms of women inclusion is diversity. Diversity of thoughts, experience, and emotions, because most times decisions are made. You need to put in all different aspects of a thought process to come to the same level. And with women, we have a different opinion in our thought process compared to men. And very key word you said is equity. That's a message I actually preach instead of equality. There are two different perspectives in my own view. I think whether you're female or male, you should be given the job to do because of the quality and the value you bring to the organization, not just using a woman to tick the box. If we can have more women that are in the position and have the ability to deliver the value we want to see, I'm 100% in support of that. However, where it's just the tokenism you're talking about, where it's just ticking the box, I actually do not share in this sentiment. I think leave the job to the person that can deliver it, whether male or female. It's the results that should really be paramount to all of us. But fortunately for us, as a bank, we actually have a very well diverse board. We have a lot of women sitting on unlike most other banks, probably have over 30% of our board members, almost 40, that are actually female. So that tells you diversity of thoughts and the diverse conversations that are had in them to make a decision in terms of a bank. And on the lower level, also in management, I can almost say we're also around the 40 or almost 50% levels. So there's a conscious effort to understand for any growth. Research has shown us that where you have more women, those organizations actually perform a lot better than when you lack diversity. But in filling those female slots, the key question for us is, does the person bring value to the table? It's not just putting someone there to tick the box. And that's my thoughts on equity.
Yeah, very much said. I totally agree with you. One other thing that we hear very well, and I prefer to say that it is loosely used, is the financial inclusion. We're still striving or thriving towards that. Achieving financial inclusion, which of course plays around the SDG goals. I mean, what would you make? And then when we hear financial inclusion, most times we hear it around gender, and most times when we hear gender, we of course know that it's targeted towards women. What would you make of financial inclusion, and how are we playing in that perspective? Do you think we're doing it right, or is there something we should sit back, re-strategize, and then work on it such that truly we achieve what it's called financial inclusion?
So my thoughts on financial inclusion, and I hope I can use an analogy I use. I think as a concept, we are trying, but as a concept. And the reason why I say it is, it's almost become a buzzword, or we like the feel and the look of it. We say it because it makes us feel good. It's a feel-good factor for our industry. And the decision makers in trying to ensure that women are included still seem to be the men. And so it's not about understanding what the women want, it's about imposing what they think you want on the women. That's why we've not seen the significant growth we're expecting. Because if you look at the data and you say entrepreneurs, you see that 70% of entrepreneurs globally on data are women. But if you now look at it in terms of volume, or in terms of value, you see that shrinks significantly to less than 30%. And that's because you see more women operating on the medium or small, micro, medium levels. Do you understand? Either micro, small, or medium levels. Even in the medium, you really find very few women operating that way. But the micro and the small, you see more women. So the question for me is, how do we ensure that the decision making on financial inclusion is beginning to pay attention to the needs of the women? I give one analogy every time I talk, when they say women need to come up. I say all of us have daughters. You've taught your daughters over the year to preserve herself. Do not approach a man. Do not go for anything. You'll be seen as desperate. You don't go forward. Be invited to talk. Be invited to get this. We've operated on this model over the years. And all of a sudden in financial inclusion, we want the woman to come out and get it. But that's not how you brought up this lady or for over 20 years. So how do we rethink the strategy around it and work around the concept in which this nuclear family has developed the girl child in, and think of the best model in which we can serve the women, because that's the upbringing they've had. So it's more of going into their space and trying to understand a woman wants something, but she's never going to declare. So how do I go in and ensure I understand she really needs it, but she's too shy to come out? Not because of competence, not because she's not intelligent enough to execute it, but because culturally, as a Nigerian woman, you've been brought up to be conservative and wait for the man to hand down to you.
Yeah, right. I totally agree with you. In other words, you're trying to say that there is a need for us to rethink the model of financial inclusion.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
It was great speaking with you. Eventually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. And that will be all on today's episode of the Women's Series. I hope you picked out one thing or two relating to the banking system, having women play in the financial sector, and of course, rethinking the model of financial inclusion going forward. If you'd like to keep this conversation going, please log on to www.proshare.co and follow us on all our social media platforms showing on the screen. And until next time, I am Ayomide Oguntoye. Thank you for watching.